In the early 1990s, Britain was going through a tough time politically and economically. The Conservative Party, led by John Major, was losing public trust. In 1992, during a crisis known as Black Wednesday, the UK was forced out of the European exchange rate mechanism after failing to keep the value of the pound stable. This damaged economic credibility. Public services faced cuts, coal mines closed, and thousands lost their jobs. By the mid-90s, things started to improve. The economy recovered and unemployment dropped. But the Conservative Party was still dealing with corruption scandals and divisions. This left an opening for Labour. In 1994, Tony Blair became Labour's leader. He set out to modernise the party, moving it away from traditional socialist views. Rebranding as New Labour, he offered a vision of change. Labour's success in the 1994 European elections, along with steady poll numbers, made it clear they were ready to win the 1997 general election. With this shift, however, Labour embraced a third-way approach that balanced traditional left-wing politics with neoliberal ideas like deregulation and privatisation. In parallel, the 90s also saw a resurgence of British cultural pride. Britpop's ability to tap into a sense of collective memory and national identity helped establish it as a central part of British life during this period. Bands like Blur and Oasis publicly supported Blair's political agenda, aligning their music with a vision of modernisation that promised a renewed sense of cultural and political pride. For Radiohead, this optimism felt hollow. Guitarist Johnny Greenwood saw Britpop as just a 1960s revival, a style that only looked back, stifling the potential for forward-thinking, groundbreaking music. He compared it to Dixieland jazz bands, playing music that tried to recreate the past instead of finding something new. Against this backdrop, OK Computer emerged as a significant departure from the prevailing cultural tide. The album opened a doorway into a different kind of reflection, one that looked forward rather than back, questioning humanity's relationship with technology and the sense of alienation that comes with constant progress. The album's title is rooted in a phrase from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In one scene, the character Zaphod Beeblebrox takes manual control from a malfunctioning spaceship computer by stating, "OK Computer," signifying a pivotal moment of reclaiming human agency from automated technology. The band, who often listened to an audio version of the series during their 1996 tour, was struck by the phrase. Tom York wrote it down as a reflection on the conflict between human autonomy and technological systems. York later explained that the album's themes were less about literal technological fear and more about human relationships affected by modern life and digital environments. While OK Computer seems to address control over machines, York saw it as a way to articulate a broader societal paranoia and disconnection. At the time, his own experience of being constantly in transit fostered a sense of detachment, which he captured in lyrics that blend technological terminology with emotions of loneliness and yearning for connection. OK Computer uses the title as a metaphor for the alienation that emerges when technology mediates human interaction. The album frames this as a loss of direct connection, presenting a world where individuals, surrounded by technological systems, struggle to connect with each other on a meaningful level. York has also described the title as reflective of a duality. It represents both an embrace of the future and a deep-seated fear of it. He articulated this concept by imagining a chaotic environment filled with machines and appliances constantly buzzing and beeping, a soundscape that evokes the overwhelming nature of modern technology. For York, OK Computer encapsulates the feeling of resignation and terror in the face of an increasingly automated world. He compared the phrase to the well-known Coca-Cola advertisement, "I'd like to teach the world to sing," suggesting a sense of ironic detachment. Wired writer Leander Carney proposes an additional interpretation, noting that the title may also serve as an homage to Macintosh computers. In particular, the Mac's speech recognition software responds to the command OK Computer, allowing users an alternative way to click the OK button, thereby reinforcing the theme of human interaction with technology. The artwork for the album was created by Tom York, in collaboration with artist Stanley Donwood. The design emerged as a collage of images and fragmented text, reflecting York's intent to capture the visual essence of the album. York commissioned Donwood to work alongside the recording process, requesting a visual diary that would reflect the album's complex themes. York has stated that he felt uncertain about the music until he saw this accompanying artwork, which provided an aesthetic cohesion and, for him, validated the album's message. The artwork is dominated by a blue and white palette, which, according to Donwood, aimed to evoke the color of bleached bone, a stark, desolate aesthetic suggestive of both emptiness and decay. This choice of colors connects to OK Computer's broader themes, suggesting an emotional and physical landscape stripped of life and vitality. The cover incorporates imagery such as highways, airplanes, corporate logos, and cityscapes, all familiar symbols of modern industrial life, indicative of the recurring themes of travel, isolation, and urban alienation. These motifs evoke a world overrun by infrastructure and technology, a world where the natural and personal are increasingly subsumed by artificial environments. Words like lost child appear within the artwork, along with fragments in Esperanto and health-related instructions in both English and Greek. These non sequiturs amplify the album's sense of disorientation, placing the listener in a collage of disconnected messages, akin to the disordered, impersonal flow of information in a modern world dominated by corporate and technological messaging. Music critic David Kavanagh noted that these jarring juxtapositions create an effect akin to being lifestyle coached by a lunatic, emphasizing the chaotic, almost dystopian experience York and Donwood sought to convey. Additionally, the album's cover includes white scribbles, Donwood's way of correcting mistakes manually rather than using the computer's undo function. These scribbles add a sense of human imperfection within a project heavily influenced by digital themes, a subtle resistance to the clean look typically achieved through computerized design. Tom York described Miles Davis's Bitches Brew as his main inspiration for the recording of OK Computer, calling it incredibly dense and terrifying. He told Q magazine that the beauty of Bitches Brew lies in its dynamic ebb and flow, a quality he wanted to capture on OK Computer. Johnny Greenwood expressed his discomfort in discussing Miles Davis as an influence, likening it to a dime store novelist talking about Shakespeare. He emphasized that Davis's contributions to music are so profound and different from what Radiohead does that it feels inappropriate to label him merely as an influence. Greenwood acknowledged that the band has shamelessly borrowed from Davis, not only in a musical sense, but also in embracing his forward-thinking attitude toward music. Greenwood elaborated on this idea during a podcast with Adam Buxton, where he mentioned that in their recent album, A Moon-Shaped Pool, they experimented with sounds that skirt the edge of chaos, akin to elements of jazz piano. He admitted that their earlier work, particularly on OK Computer, was an attempt to capture the essence of Davis, even if no one in the band played trumpet. Greenwood described this ambition as aiming for a high artistic standard and being satisfied with the result, even if it didn't precisely match their original intention. Joe Zawinul, an Austrian-born musician and composer, wrote Pharaoh's Dance for Bitches Brew. Zawinul, who emigrated from Vienna to New York, later reflected that the track captured the chaos and intensity of the urban landscape he encountered in the city. He noted that Davis and producer Teo Macero transformed his composition in the studio, arranging it in a way that sounded like an entirely new piece of music. Nigel Godrich reflected on this artistic approach when discussing the side project, Atoms for Peace. He noted the influence of Davis's music on the creative process, highlighting the importance of interaction and editing in crafting dynamic compositions. He remarked on how their work evolved with a jazz-inspired mindset, utilizing large blocks of music and edits to create arrangements. The sound of Bitches Brew, shaped by Macero's production, had a raw, dense quality that Zawinul described as both beautiful and chaotic. This mood has been noted as an influence on OK Computer. While the Radiohead album doesn't overtly resemble Bitches Brew, it shares a similar complexity and emotional weight with an abstract layering of sounds. Subterranean Homesick Alien began as a simple duet, but changed dramatically after the band's self-imposed exposure to Bitches Brew. Radiohead reworked the song into a glistening, spacey track. The electric keyboards, reaching out as if toward the stars, reflect this transformation. The song's title references Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues, indirectly nodding to its surreal themes and the narrator's alienation. Tom York drew on a high school exercise inspired by Craig Rain's A Martian Sends a Postcard Home, where students wrote from an alien's perspective observing human behavior. Years later, after a personal experience reminded him of this assignment, York wrote Subterranean Homesick Alien as a reflection of feeling disconnected, imagining how an outsider might view life on Earth. Johnny Greenwood suggests that for him, the song's theme is more about hope and human faith than actual extraterrestrial life. He connects this to the universal human search for meaning across generations. In Bitches Brew, Davis and his band use unconventional recording techniques, effects and reverb to give each instrument a distinct space within the sound, allowing textures to overlap and collide, often unpredictably. On Subterranean Homesick Alien, Radiohead sought to capture that open floating atmosphere where instruments shift in and out of focus. It starts with 3 inverted chords, D minor, A flat major, and D major, with a beautiful melody woven between them. Tom's electric piano has a warm, bell-like tone with gentle sustain. It creates a smooth, fluid sound like the soft rolling quality of water. As the music builds momentum, everything seems to fall together, like tumbling into a new world. And then the song lands in the key of G mixolydian with a relaxed, almost folk-like warmth. Johnny and Ed's guitars sound like rockets or shooting stars, with all the dives in the guitar lines. It's as if they're trying to describe a starry night sky. The verse feels very gentle with the vocal melody, blending delicately into the instruments. The final version of Subterranean Homesick Alien builds on layers of sound, yet the recording leaves enough space for each part to be heard clearly. Even with all the added textures, nothing feels crowded. This approach ties back to the influence of Bitches Brew, where complex arrangements still allowed every element to come through distinctly. The lyrics on OK Computer mark a shift from the deeply personal, emotional focus seen in The Bends to a more abstract observational style. Critic Alex Ross noted that York's lyrics feel like a patchwork of overheard conversations, techno-speak, and fragments of a harsh diary, depicting scenes of modern life, suburban angst, and corporate breakdowns. The album's lyrical themes touch on transport, technology, globalization, and anti-capitalism, creating a mosaic of societal and existential concerns. York described the songwriting process as capturing Polaroids of things around me moving too fast, and likened each song to an observation made by a neutral, emotionless camera, witnessing a series of characters and scenes. While the camera's perspective is ostensibly detached, York explained that this detachment only enhances the intensity of the emotions being portrayed. York's experience at a bar one night in Los Angeles, where he witnessed a disturbing outburst, directly influenced the lyrics of Paranoid Android. The song captures both the intensity of that moment and broader themes present elsewhere on the album. One of the strangers at the bar that night, a woman in a Gucci dress, became extremely aggressive when someone accidentally spilled a drink on her. York found her behavior so unsettling that it kept him awake that night. This influenced the lyrics in the second part of the song, specifically the line, "Kicking, squealing Gucci little piggy." The phrase is vivid, almost grotesque, and an effective criticism of consumer culture, Gucci being a luxury brand associated with wealth, and piggy implying gluttony and selfishness. The lyrics in the final part get more direct. The yuppies networking, the panic, the vomit. It's a pretty bleak view of how people chase success and ambition, often at a high personal cost, and how all of this brings its own kind of sickness. The line, "God loves his children," could be read as unsettling, a comforting phrase spoken into a void, as if grasping for faith in a world that no longer guarantees it. The song's title references Marvin, the paranoid android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Marvin, the paranoid android, serves as a satirical embodiment of AI gone wrong. He's the ship's robot aboard the Heart of Gold, designed with genuine people personalities by the fictional Sirius Cybernetics Corporation. However, Marvin's personality reflects an unfortunate outcome of this technology. He suffers from profound depression and an unshakable sense of futility. Built with a brain described as the size of a planet, Marvin possesses intellectual capabilities far beyond those needed for his menial tasks aboard the ship. Yet this immense intelligence has no meaningful outlet, intensifying his existential boredom. The irony in Marvin's design lies in his misalignment with purpose. While he's capable of complex thought, The ship's routine tasks don't come close to challenging his mind, leaving him acutely aware of his wasted potential. The disparity between Marvin's capacity and his function highlights the unintended consequences of over-engineering and exposes the hollow promises of technologies that aim to humanize artificial intelligence. The phrase "God loves his children" and Marvin's character illuminate a shared metaphysical dilemma. The boundaries of human creation, whether divine or technological, cannot account for the full scope of existential need. What remains is the quiet horror of an artificial love and a divine promise, both unable to transcend the gap between their intentions and the real lived experiences of their creations. The broader themes of OK Computer, from consumerism to dehumanization and existential despair, find their darkest, most distilled form in Fitter, Happier. York saw the words as a bleak reflection of 90s consumerist values, describing it as the most upsetting thing he'd ever written. Among the disturbing images is the line "a pig in a cage on antibiotics," a stark metaphor York drew from Jonathan Coe's satirical novel, What a Carve-Up. In the novel, Coe critiques 1980s Britain, highlighting how shifts in industrialized farming symbolize a broader moral decay. This image of the pig in a cage fits seamlessly into Fitter, Happier's portrayal of humans in a dark, dehumanized light, trapped in systems that value material comfort over real well-being. Just as Coe uses the plight of animals to explore societal indifference, York layers this metaphor into Fitter, Happier to reveal the unsettling effects of consumerism on modern life, where people find themselves in confined, automated routines that promise satisfaction but deliver numbness. The phrase "concerned but powerless" draws on ideas from Mark Fisher's book Capitalist Realism, which argues that modern society has accepted capitalism as the only viable system to the extent that imagining an alternative seems impossible. This creates a sense of entrapment. People may recognize the flaws in the system and feel concern, but they see no realistic way to change it. The characters in OK Computer, including the narrator of Fitter, Happier, represent what Fisher calls consumer spectators, individuals who navigate a world dominated by capitalist structures but feel powerless to alter their circumstances. OK Computer doesn't propose solutions, it simply mirrors the bleakness of this reality. The band considered opening the album with Fitter, Happier, but felt it was too jarring, settling instead on using it as a mid-album shock. Steve Lowe saw it as a surgery on the emptiness of corporate-driven lifestyles. As author Jules Footman notes, the track embodies the materially comfortable, morally empty person, a dark satire on the way consumerism promises fulfillment but delivers numbness. In his book The Age of Extremes, which influenced OK Computer and Climbing Up the Walls in particular, the historian Eric Hobsbawm describes how the transition into the 21st century left people disoriented, navigating a global fog of uncertainty. This external instability, marked by rapid economic shifts, social fragmentation, and weakened support structures, had profound psychological effects. The fog wasn't just a societal condition, but infiltrated individuals' inner lives, affecting their sense of identity and security. Hobsbawm highlights this instability by referencing this observation published in the New York Times in 1991. Was it an accident that of the 10 largest mass murderers in American history, 8 have occurred since 1980, typically acts of middle-aged white men in their 30s and 40s after a prolonged period of being lonely, frustrated, and full of rage, and often precipitated by a catastrophe in their lives, such as losing their jobs or divorce? While this pattern reflected the late 20th century, the demographic has since expanded, with younger individuals and diverse motivations now more common. In Hobsbawm's view, late capitalism fosters alienation by reducing individuals to economic units and de-emphasizing community and well-being. This alienation intensifies personal crises, as seen in his reference to rising incidents of mass murder, particularly among men facing personal trauma. Climbing Up the Walls channels this latent violence. Tom York's lyrics describe an invasive, almost predatory presence, an embodiment of the psychological strain Hobsbawm identifies. The song's embodiment of the real variety of horror is rooted in unsettling facts about mass murderers and the potential for normal people to snap into violent behavior under certain conditions. In Age of Extremes, Hobsbawm discusses the psychological impact of late capitalism. The Mass Murderers quote is part of a broader argument about how social isolation and perceived failures contribute to violence or mental collapse. Hobsbawm isn't diagnosing individuals, but highlighting systemic issues that shape personal crises. Climbing Up the Walls is a dense composition with unsettling string arrangements inspired by composer Krzysztof Penderecki. Penderecki's threnody features a technique where strings are played in a dissonant, fragmented way, with players intentionally out of sync with each other. Greenwood adapted this technique by having the members of a string section play quarter notes apart from each other. While Penderecki used his piece to reflect the trauma of nuclear war and the devastation of Hiroshima, Greenwood applied that same sense of horror to represent the frightening and insidious thoughts York wanted to convey. The song isn't just about external violence, but about internal terror, about something far more personal and intimate, the human mind and the potential for darkness within it. The connection to Penderecki's work allows the song to explore this feeling on a deep level, making the music just as disturbing as the lyrics themselves. OK Computer's focus on mood and texture also drew from other influences, such as the work of Italian composer Ennio Morricone, which shaped the direction of exit music for a film. The song was written for the closing credits of Baz Luhrmann's 1996 film Romeo and Juliet. Luhrmann sent the band a tape of the film's ending and requested music that would suit the closing sequence. Radiohead imagined a scenario where Romeo awakens Juliet and they escape together, leaving behind their families and the conflicts that separate them. In a New York Times interview, Tom York mentioned that Morricone's track Bambole from the 1974 film Spasmo was a particular inspiration for exit music. Spasmo is a film with a disorienting, surreal feel to it, and this is reflected in Morricone's score, which consists of a series of variations on 3 themes. Throughout the soundtrack, Morricone balances light and dark elements, blending disturbing tones with more natural instruments in a way that fits the pacing and mood of the film. The primary theme, Bambole, is notable for its soft, dreamy qualities. It features smooth floating vocals over light woodwinds, subtle rhythms, and an electric harpsichord. Bambole has 5 variations, and while it starts as the least dark, Morricone subtly shifts the tempo and orchestration in each variation to gradually add an uneasy undertone. A particularly intriguing variation, Bambole No. 3, combines clean, clear guitars with an organ that seems just slightly off-key. Bambole offers a stable, familiar melody, even in its different forms. In contrast, the suite titled Stress Infinito is based on a series of dissonant string pieces. These sections are much harsher and less structured than Bambole, using clashing notes to create tension. While traditional thriller scores might rely on rhythm or melody for suspense, Stress Infinito uses dissonance to produce unease. Morricone often combines soft melodic themes with darker synthesized sounds, and this is reflected in exit music's sound design. The song's production serves as a reminder that great recordings aren't just about creating a perfect or natural sound. Instead, they use every available tool to enhance the music's emotional impact. Written in B minor, the song's tonality and lyrics reflect the story's inevitable tragedy. York described it as a song for 2 people who should run away before all the bad stuff starts. The music sounds very heavy and tragic, partly due to the use of the harmonic minor scale. The structure invites comparison to classical music, as it uses some of the same musical ideas as Chopin's Prelude No. 4. For example, both pieces have a sol-la-sol melody, which embodies a repeated musical phrase, and a suspenseful note that adds tension before resolving. However, exit music feels darker and heavier than Chopin's work. Production-wise, there are some really notable things with some unsettling sound design. It starts intimate with just Tom and an acoustic guitar, then builds with electronic sounds and a mellotron. The climax, where drums and distorted bass kick in, was inspired by trip-hop music, though Radiohead wanted it to feel more mechanical and grounded. The song then fades back to just York's voice and guitar, with a haunting end that leaves a strong impression. While the album deals with heavy themes, it avoids being depressing because of the emotional beauty in the music. This beauty, more often than not, carries an underlying sense of something darker. For example, No Surprises is a deceptively gentle song, combining glockenspiel and harmonies, inspired by the Beach Boys' Wouldn't It Be Nice. The band aimed for a mood similar to Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World." York's vocal delivery is calm and detached, addressing extremely depressing themes. The opening line, "A heart that's full up like a landfill," is a powerful metaphor that compares emotional overload to the physical and environmental burden of a landfill. York suggests that emotions, like non-degradable trash, are often buried and hidden away instead of being processed. Just as plastic waste accumulates without breaking down, humans suppress their emotional debris, avoiding the need to confront it. According to York, the song captures the experience of someone desperately trying to maintain control, but ultimately failing. The last verse has the image of a pretty house and pretty garden, which are typically symbols of stability and happiness. The contrast here from the earlier verses highlights the psychological disconnect between the idealized outward appearance of life and the internal reality of emotional distress. This idea of a facade, things looking good on the outside but hiding deeper pain or emptiness, fits perfectly with the dissonance between the soothing music and the depressing lyrics. The soft, pleasant music lures the listener into the pretty world, while the lyrics reveal the harsh truth underneath. While many associate OK Computer with futuristic and tech-heavy themes, the album's lyrics and production are more grounded in analog imagery and traditional instrumentation. It is less about the specifics of technology and more about the psychological and social impacts of living in a world dominated by abstract systems. It examines how modern life, with its layers of impersonal structures, distances people from genuine experience and connection. What sets it apart from other works of its time is that it doesn't simply try to chase the zeitgeist of the time, but focuses on a broader emotional feeling that remains relevant beyond its specific era. When Johnny Greenwood describes Let Down as capturing the feeling of being in transit, moving past thousands of places and thousands of people, but feeling completely removed, it highlights a kind of passive existence. Travel, especially repetitive and impersonal forms like being on a plane, creates a sense of separation from the environment. You're physically there, but emotionally and mentally detached, observing the world pass by. This detachment creates a surreal unease that is mirrored in modern life, where the flood of impressions from the world around us doesn't lead to any true engagement or meaning. The repetition of motions, transport, motorways, and tram lines, starting and then stopping, illustrates the cyclical, mechanical nature of life. The fear of being stuck in a cycle of disappointment and the frustration of not finding meaning or purpose despite being surrounded by constant motion. It's about the recognition that, despite all the outward trappings of normality, something essential is missing, and the emotional numbness that comes with accepting that emptiness. An interesting observation about OK Computer is that Electioneering is both the heaviest track musically and also the most overtly political. It is a rock-driven track marked by cowbells and distorted guitar, influenced by events like the poll tax riots and Noam Chomsky's manufacturing consent. The song is a critique of the commercial machinery that shapes not just politics, but also the music industry. The connection to manufacturing consent becomes clear through their shared concerns about the illusion of choice and the ways in which individuals and systems are shaped by broader economic and media structures. By the 1990s, the UK media was dominated by a few major players, including Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation, which had significant control over political and economic narratives. The branding of England as Cool Britannia was a media-driven narrative, framing the UK as a cultural and economic success under Tony Blair's new Labour government. Media emphasized this feel-good narrative while downplaying more critical stories, such as rising income inequality or the struggles of deindustrialized regions. Tony Blair's new Labour Party embraced a centrist, pro-market stance, appealing to media owners and advertisers. The British press, particularly outlets like The Sun, shifted to support Blair in the 1997 election. Media often framed Blair's policies as a necessary modernization of Labour, while critiques of neoliberalism or opposition voices were sidelined. Radiohead has mentioned how Tony Blair's rise to power was framed like a pop star's debut, which plays directly into the critique of how politics and public figures are treated as commodities or entertainment. The band has also expressed that their experiences in the music industry during tours, where they had to constantly shake hands and maintain public appearances, influenced electioneering. In Radiohead's view, the commercial machinery shaping both politics and the music industry operates on a similar dynamic: sell an image, manipulate public perception, and prioritize spectacle over substance. The poll tax, introduced by Margaret Thatcher's government in 1989, was a regressive tax that charged every adult a flat rate, regardless of income or property value. Unlike the previous system, which was based on property value, this tax disproportionately affected low-income individuals, especially those in shared housing. This led to widespread public outrage, culminating in the poll tax riots of 1990. The poll tax is a clear example of what Tom York might refer to as voodoo economics, a phrase criticizing economic policies such as Reagan's trickle-down economics, which appear beneficial on the surface but ultimately deepen social inequality. The reference to IMF represents global financial institutions that impose austerity measures, often harming poorer nations while benefiting powerful economies. The cattle prods criticize how these policies are enforced through both metaphorical and literal coercion. In the mid and late 90s, protests against globalization, such as the rise of environmental or anti-capitalist movements, were often framed as fringe or chaotic. While the internet has democratized access to information in many ways, the structures described in manufacturing consent have adapted rather than disappeared. The dominance of corporate-owned media, the influence of advertising, and the marginalization of dissent remain significant issues. The idea of karma offers a psychological relief for people who lack direct power within systems that often privilege the wealthy or influential. Karma Police presents absurd imagery that creates a surreal confusion. The ambiguous modal structure reflects some of this psychological uncertainty. The structural choices in the music could be intentional, suggesting deeper connections to psychological elements. The verse alternates between A natural minor and A Dorian, or between E natural minor and E Phrygian. The chorus, however, shifts to G major with the line, "This is what you'll get," offering a moment of clear but ominous certainty. The outro returns to an ambiguous modal structure, moving between B minor and D major. Tom York's repeated line, "For a minute there, I lost myself," is incredibly impactful. His voice, treated with reverb, gives a sense of drifting and losing connection. Toward the end of the track, Ed O'Brien's guitar creates a melting effect. This is achieved by using a delay effect to self-oscillate, then lowering the delay rate to create a disorienting, decaying sound. This moment contributes to a sense of emotional and psychological disintegration. Jonathan Glazer's treatment for the Karma Police music video draws on David Lynch's Lost Highway, particularly the opening scene, where a car drives down a deserted road from the driver's perspective. The escaping man in the video is Hungarian actor Kovács Lajos, chosen for his ambiguous appearance. It's hard to tell if he's a villain or victim. This ambiguity reflects Lynch's film, which also leaves viewers questioning who is guilty and who is simply caught in a cycle of events beyond their control. Both works challenge the audience to confront the instability of identity and responsibility. The simplicity and lack of context in Jonathan Glazer's video feels almost dreamlike or symbolic. The force behind the judgment is never seen. The environment is minimalistic and void of clear external markers, focusing attention on emotions or unseen forces. Lost Highway is a fragmented, non-linear narrative. Its oppressive mood mirrors the psychological strain in Glazer's video, where authority seems more metaphysical or internal than literal. The fact that OK Computer begins and ends with its most benign tracks suggests a deliberate structure that frames the album's darker themes. These songs, Airbag, Lucky, and The Tourist, stand in contrast to the more unsettling themes found in the middle of the album. Airbag channels Tom's reflections on a near disaster into a meditation on the fragility and value of life. York has said how unsettling it is that so many people feel trapped in unfulfilling routines, leaving homes they don't connect with to commute to jobs they don't enjoy, all while facing the daily risks of car travel. He was in a serious car accident with his girlfriend when he was younger and has harbored a fear of cars ever since. This experience shaped much of the album's themes: the fear of technology, the loss of humanity, and a deep sense of existential dread. Yet, Airbag turns this dynamic inside out. As Phil Selway described it, the song captures the rush of relief after narrowly avoiding a crash, when the realization of how close one came to disaster sets in. This moment of clarity and joy makes life, suddenly fragile, feel more valuable. The introductory melody is played on a mellotron using a cello sample. This melody navigates modal mixture, transitioning between major and minor chords. The effect is an interesting harmonic conflict. A clean guitar then enters, playing primarily within the A major scale, which brings some warmth but also mild dissonance. The guitar lines and the guitar-cello riff do not resolve harmonically, but instead remain somewhat at odds with each other. The phrasing is unusual, with melodies entering unpredictably, much like a run-on sentence that defies expectations. Radiohead crafted the track's rhythm using a chopped 3-second loop of Phil Selway's drumming. Johnny Greenwood recalls how Tom York and Selway spent hours reconstructing the beat to capture the fragmented, glitchy style inspired by DJ Shadow. In the 8th measure, an A major chord with an added 9th note rings out, filling the space with a warm sound. Over this chord, York's vocal line, "I am born again," brings a moment of comfort and precise clarity, grounding the listener in a sense of renewal. Sleigh bells and electronic blips gesture toward a future marked by both possibility and risk. Lucky returns to the theme of survival but with a more somber tone. It was originally written for a charity album during the Bosnian War, a context that gives it broader implications about resilience. The plane crash metaphor captures both the fragility of life and the hope that comes from enduring catastrophe. The music reflects this duality. The chord progression of the verse with the melody is simple but dark and ominous. It goes from darkness into the light in a way that's beautiful and optimistic. The second verse features a mellotron choir that enters subtly in the mix, enhancing the drama. The descending melody of "I feel my luck could change," which comes at the end of the verse, is also very impactful. The juxtaposition of "It's gonna be a glorious day," with the final darker ending, "We are standing on the edge," portrays the fragility of survival and the uncertainty that follows. Here, survival isn't just personal, it's collective, hinting at the broader struggles and resilience of those affected by conflict. As the closing track, The Tourist serves as a reflective counterpoint to the more heavier themes. It was written by Johnny Greenwood, who explains that Tom was in a beautiful square in France on a sunny day, and watching all these American tourists being wheeled around, frantically trying to see everything in 10 minutes. Johnny was shocked at how these people could be in a place so special and not realize it because they weren't taking the time to just stop and look around. Greenwood wrote it as a deliberately calm song. The song serves as a personal reminder for York to slow down and let go of the pressure to constantly move forward. By ending the album with this message, Radiohead underscores the themes of stress, speed, and disconnection with a final call to slow down. Throughout the album, Radiohead explores what happens when people get swept up by these forces, losing control over their own lives and identities. The song's conclusion, with guitars fading out to leave only bass drums and the sound of a bell, brings a gentle resolution to the album's journey. When OK Computer was released in 1997, technology was just starting to impact everyday life on a large scale. The internet was new and rapidly connecting people, but no one fully understood how deeply it would affect society. The title, OK Computer, was inspired by a line from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it has a layered meaning. On one hand, it sounds casual, as if saying, "Fine, let's let computers handle things." But at the same time, it hints at a feeling of surrender, of giving up control to machines and systems that don't fully understand or care about human needs. OK Computer constantly balances noise and quiet, speed and stillness. The artwork, designed by Stanley Donwood, complements the music's themes. The half-erased imagery of highways, airplanes, and corporate symbols mirrors the album's mix of clarity and distortion, echoing a world where technology and industry overshadow individuality. York said the title reflected a mix of resignation and fear about the future. The themes and concerns in OK Computer were already present in the world when the album was released, making it more a snapshot of late 90s society than a speculative future. Also contrary to its reputation as a technologically forward-thinking album, OK Computer is grounded in more analog and traditional elements. The lyrics emphasize the everyday realities of modern life. Rather than specifics about technology, the album focuses on a broader emotional feeling that remains relevant beyond its specific era. OK Computer doesn't provide solutions. It reflects what Fitter Happier describes as concerned but powerless, a phrase from Mark Fisher, who wrote about the difficulty of imagining an alternative to capitalism. This bleak sense of inevitability runs through tracks like No Surprises, where York's narrator sounds resigned to a system that grinds people down. Even Electioneering, the most overtly political track, offers no rallying cry, just anger and frustration with global capitalism packaged in fragmented, explosive lines. Capitalist realism describes the belief that capitalism is the only viable system, making alternatives seem unimaginable. The robotic narration of Fitter Happier catalogues a life optimized for efficiency, reflecting Fisher's idea of the consumer spectator, individuals who experience life as passive participants in a system they cannot escape. Neoliberal ideology plays a central role in both Fisher's critique and OK Computer. Blair's third-way politics, which leaned into neoliberal ideas, offered little substantive challenge to global capitalism. Radiohead resisted the optimism of 1990s Cool Britannia, while other artists embraced this period's modernization and national pride. In his book The Age of Extremes, which influenced the album, historian Eric Hobsbawm wrote about people in the late 20th century tapping their way through the global fog into an uncertain future. Age of Extremes provides a historically grounded pessimism that aligns perfectly with the artistic critiques found in OK Computer. Like Leonard Cohen's The Future, OK Computer served as a sobering counterpoint to the prevailing narrative of triumphalism following events like the fall of the Berlin Wall. Cohen acknowledged his role as the gloomy fellow who dampens celebratory moments. While the world rejoiced at the Berlin Wall's collapse, he foresaw the suffering that might follow. "I don't think it's going to happen that way," he remarked, challenging the euphoria surrounding the era's supposed triumphs. This skepticism extended to his broader reflections on democracy, which he viewed as a deeply ironic yet vital experiment, particularly in the US, a nation he saw as the real laboratory of democracy. The album's themes were shaped by Cohen's immediate environment, living in Los Angeles during riots, earthquakes, and floods. This sense of urgency permeates the future, which doesn't just comment on political or historical events, but confronts humanity's broader struggles with power, identity, and survival. Songs like Democracy and Anthem balance their grim observations with a profound love for the potential of humanity. The album reflects Cohen's ability to hold two truths at once: a world teetering on the edge and the hope that something meaningful might still emerge from the chaos. OK Computer, also despite its grim themes, is not a depressing record. Its beauty, humor, and moments of elation counterbalance the darkness. Songs like Lucky and Airbag offer a sense of triumph and renewal. The album's bedrock of compassion is its most redeeming quality, offering listeners a sense of solidarity in an insane world. In the end, OK Computer is less about answers and more about capturing the noise, motion, and confusion of its time. Instead of delivering overt messages, the band concentrated on mood. The restless hum of existence, hope threaded through despair, and the strange humanity even in the coldest machine. It serves as a reminder that in the chaos of any age, the act of simply listening can be its own kind of clarity. It doesn't attempt to untangle the confusion of modern life or pin its anxieties to a single source. Through this focus on a broader emotional feeling, it has become future-proof, still relevant in an age where the pace of life and reach of technology continue to grow. The album's brilliance lies in its ability to confront the chaos head-on while leaving space for listeners to find their own meaning within it.